Let's explore this session from range of motion individualized programming, which draws and steals heavily from the sport of strongman, both in terms of the movements which are being used, the implements which are being used, and also of course the time domains and therefore the benefits of this style of training. So if we look first at the implements which are being used here, very typical to strongman style training with the use of a log, atlas stones, and a fat grip dumbbell. In terms of the energy systems being used, you can see there's a very aggressive 90-second work period with an extended period of rest. And this is very typical to that strongman style of training. So let's first explore the session science here. And you can see that although there are only 3 movements, there are 4 different planes or types of movement that we are training. There is a more anterior chain dominant movement, a more posterior chain dominant movement, and we involve some upper body pulling and press type movements. This of course creates great muscular balance in the body where we don't have overuse in certain muscle groups or movement types, but it also creates a blood shunting effect where we are shunting blood to different areas of the body to maximize the cardiorespiratory or work capacity benefit of this session. Now, as a result of this quite aggressive energy system and the shorter interval, we are training the glycolytic energy system here. What this is able to do is increase our ability to produce ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, to fuel our muscle contractions. As the intervals here are only 90 seconds, it means that this high rate of work enables us to increase our anaerobic threshold. That is the point at which we can exercise before we start to accumulate too many of the negative byproducts of this exercise. Now, this is not the most effective type of session to get really strong. It's not the most effective type of session to really improve your cardiorespiratory endurance. However, it is extremely effective at training both at the same time, which makes it a very efficient way of training to improve both strength and that cardiorespiratory endurance. Now you can see there is a 1-to-3 work to rest ratio here. During this rest interval, it is really important to do active recovery. The reason is, high intensity for 90 seconds, your body starts to produce hydrogen ions, which are the byproduct of this anaerobic metabolism, which is how we're creating a lot of the energy to fuel the muscle contractions to move the loads in this session. Nice active recovery, which is going to help to buffer these hydrogen ions through the kidneys and out of the body, which means that we can then perform at a high rate in the future intervals. Let's now talk about the health and the body composition benefits of this session. Now, starting with the odd objects, which are such a characteristic of strongman style training. They have huge carryover into life. So far from being the perfectly balanced bars and dumbbells that you may ordinarily train with, these will start to emulate some of the odd objects that you will be forced and required to move during life in general. So there is a huge carryover here between this style of training and what you're doing outside the training arena. Now, although there are almost limitless exercises that we can do, there are a finite number of actual movements. For example, you can do a standard deadlift with a barbell. You could do that same movement with an axle. You could pick up an atlas stone. You could flip a tire. Very similar movement patterns. However, if we only train the stock standard barbell deadlift, we only get a certain raft of benefits. The more variety we have in our training, the broader our adaptation is going to be and the broader the benefits that we achieve from those movements. And if we look in particular at some of the unilateral type movements here, where our body is working independently from one side to the other, these are great for building some balance in the body and for building joint strength and stability. And of course, there's a really good benefit for your mind from this style of training. Because these exercises are novel and things that you have not performed as much as maybe something with a barbell, your mind and brain are going to thrive off this novelty, and it's going to help to stay motivated and stuck with that training program for longer. And of course, staying with the mind, there's this problem-solving effect that comes along. Often, even though you're not fatigued at the start of this session, you can struggle with these movements. But there's a real neuroplasticity where our motor control development and learning accelerates very quickly through the session as we work out the optimal way to move these objects. Now, of course, aside from the fact that we are doing strongman style odd object training here, in the end, it is just a form of resistance training, lifting weights like any other. So we get all of those added benefits that you get from resistance training. Changes in your body composition, increases in bone mineral density, things like fall prevention as you improve both your power and your strength. And of course, as a result of this resistance training, you also get an increase in lean muscle mass, how much muscle tissue you have in your body, which is favorable not only in the long term, because if you have more muscle mass, you're often stronger, and more strength often equals more health, but you also get this effect of EPOC, EPOC, which is excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. This is basically just a fancy way of saying that after you finish this training session, your body will continue to operate at a higher metabolic rate for an extended period. So not only are you going to increase the amount of lean muscle you have in the long run, but you're burning more energy for an extended period up to 38 hours after the training session itself. So from a weight loss perspective, to create a healthy body weight, this can be a very effective session. And of course, the cardiovascular training effects and benefits of this session are also prevalent. Things like improvements in blood flow to the brain and a reduction in cardiovascular and respiratory disease risk factors. And finally, the effects on the blood chemistry, where you will see favorable adaptations in things like triglycerides, blood glucose levels, and cholesterol. Let's shift now onto the performance benefits of this session. And the fact that we are exercising with odd objects will have a huge carryover into performance of multiple sports and movements. As we've already spoken about in terms of the health benefits, you're able to take a movement which you're unfamiliar with and adapt that to suit the situations of life. If you can adapt more in training with these odd objects, that will transfer into any sort of physical performance or sporting field that you may be looking to improve. And of course, because we are using resistance training, we're going to be improving our strength, which is going to have a lot of physical performance benefits. If your strength is improving, not only will you improve your 1 rep maxes, but you will also improve your ability to move a sub-maximal weight for a higher number of repetitions. And of course, as strength is an element of power, and a lot of these movements in strongman style training do require a high degree of power, you will become a lot more powerful in movements like Olympic weightlifting or explosive plyometric or ballistic work. And as we've already touched upon, the benefits to your cardiorespiratory system are vast. In fact, these shorter time domains, 90 seconds worth of work, where we're working at that threshold between anaerobic and aerobic exercise, highly efficient ways to improve that anaerobic threshold, which effectively means we can exercise at a higher rate before breaking down and hitting the wall. As a result of this session, you will experience improvements in the storage of certain substrates in the muscles, which will improve our ability to have these repeated muscle contractions. And you'll also improve enzyme activity, which is going to improve the delivery of energy to the muscles. And there will also be positive changes at the muscular level, which will improve your performance. An increased fatigue resistibility of these muscles will come from an increase in the number of these more slow twitch muscle fibers, which will allow us to sustain these continuing contractions without hitting fatigue. And also improving our ability to resist fatigue is an increase in the number of mitochondria that you will achieve in your muscles as a result of this style of training. These mitochondria mean that we are able again to create more sustained muscle contractions without hitting fatigue as quickly. We also have an increase in the number of capillaries in your muscles, which is going to improve our ability to take blood to and from those muscle beds, to take to our muscles the things they need for optimal performance, and to remove some of those waste products. The final benefit that we see here from a performance perspective is an improvement in the muscles involved in breathing, the muscles around our diaphragm, our rib cage, which again will improve our work capacity as we strengthen these muscles, particularly while lifting under this heavy load and resistance. Now let's talk strategy. And strategy here, although there is one, the strategy really is to go hard, to go fast. There is enough recovery here to justify that high intensity, that high work rate during the 90 seconds. Again, that 270-second break is long enough that you can have almost a full recovery to be able to hit each interval at a very high intensity. Again, very important in this session to hit an active recovery in that 270 seconds rest. Again, it will ensure that we are buffering some of those hydrogen ions out of the blood and ensuring that we're able to then hit the next interval again at a very high intensity. How should this session feel for the individual who is completing it? Well, it should be equally biased towards strength and power and cardiorespiratory endurance. You shouldn't be limited by your inability to lift the weight. You shouldn't be limited by your inability to catch your breath. to be able to get air into your lungs, oxygen around your body. It should be equal. So there's maybe a slight bias because of the strongman nature of this towards strength, but you should not have to stop at any point because you can no longer lift the load that you are required to lift. Now you should feel like you are very close to hitting the wall during each interval here, although you will not actually hit the wall until during the last maybe 10 to 15 seconds of each interval, where because you're almost there from a mental perspective, you can push through anyway and just hold on. Don't overpace this. You should go out hard and then work really hard to maintain that pace for the entire minute and a half. In terms of scaling guidelines here, because we are programming a certain percentage, you should find that you won't need to scale this down because the weights will be based on what you're able to lift anyway. However, if you are quite new to exercise and your tests are maybe not up to date and you don't know your maxes, you may actually be able to go a little heavier than you expect. This is because a lot of people, when they first start training, haven't established what these maxes are and are able to actually perform a little bit more weight than they may have initially thought. In terms of scaling, because of the type of movement, and maybe you don't have the implement or the equipment needed for these, we would look at scaling that log front rack squat to a standard barbell front squat. We can change the bear hug stone carry to a barbell hang power clean for 4 repetitions. And we can change the fat dumbbell shoulder to overhead to either a standard dumbbell or a barbell push press or push jerk shoulder to overhead. All of these movements performed at 75% of the individual's max. There are 3 common mistakes we often see in this session. The first mistake is overpacing, almost forgetting that there is a rest interval in there and going out too slow in those 90-second work intervals. Make sure you go out and you hit those hard. The second big mistake is sacrificing form and technique. Although the intensity is very high, we are looking for intensity with good form, because good form is safe form, is efficient form, is strong form. These circles overlap completely. And the final mistake we often see is people failing to do this active recovery during that 270-second rest period. Just jumping on an air bike and just turning those wheels and pedals over very slowly is going to have a huge impact on your ability to recover and will therefore increase the benefit you get from each interval thereafter. This is a highly effective and stimulating session, a session which is not only going to improve strength and power and cardiorespiratory endurance, but a session that can actually be a lot of fun as well. You should never underestimate the value of novelty in your training, and this session is a great example of that.